And happy Friday night. It is Car Con Carne. I'm James Van Osdol, and Car Con Carne, sponsored tonight by C&H Financial Services. Sorry, I got distracted. C&H Financial Services. I love C&H Financial Services. They offer a variety of products that range from traditional merchant accounts to a zero-cost payment processing solution, which eliminates expenses tied to accepting credit cards. C&H also offers cost-effective commercial lending programs, which can help you get your business the money it needs to make it through these unprecedented times. To learn more, contact C&H Financial Services at 855-600-2437 or go to chfs.us. I also want to thank Happy to Meet You, happytomeetyou.com, MEAT, the letter U.com. This week, this is it, this week, all week long, free local delivery with my promo code JVO. Restaurant, steakhouse quality meats delivered right to your front door in a friendly, handsome package. I'm actually shocked, not shocked. I love the fact that I've gotten so many texts and pictures and messages from people who've ordered food from Happy to Meet You this week and have been loving it. I myself made the Mother Chucker tonight. This is the Mother Chucker, hot off my cast iron skillet. The Mother Chucker, a carefully balanced blend of prime chuck and outside skirt. It kicks ass. Happytomeetyou.com, MEAT-U. MEAT, of course, a homophone. That all said, well, I'm going to take a bite of this. I don't want to make my guests feel weird. So, Mother Chucker, cheers. Happy Friday.
Wait, are we supposed to be eating?
You can if you want.
Ah,
whatever you feel comfortable doing.
oh, that's right.
Those people right there, those wonderful human beings you're looking at, Joe Losurdo, Christina Tillman, they are filmmakers. And right out of the gate, I want to talk about your excellent documentary about the Chicago punk scene from 1977 to 1984. You weren't there, a history of Chicago punk. What is it about that period? Why was Chicago kind of ignored as the conversation nationally, internationally was focused on the two coasts, on what was happening in Los Angeles, what was happening in New York? Why wasn't Chicago in the same conversation?
I think it's just being in the Midwest. I think that the LA and New York being the entertainment centers, although Chicago was an entertainment center for a while in the 50s and 60s, but I think by the 70s, not a lot of labels were based here anymore. Mm-hmm. So, I just think the Midwest is still never really considered cool by the people on the coasts, which is kind of silly.
We're the flyover.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean,
still.
Yeah, but most cool people from LA or New York are probably from the Midwest, that just moved out there to get a career.
So, Joe, you were knee deep, waist deep in the Chicago punk scene in that period. Life Sentence, coolest logo ever. Life Sentence. What made you decide I want to revisit this and spend years revisiting this and putting this out there, telling this story? Was it the sort of thing you felt like it had to be told?
It was a lot of it was the people, to be honest, like the bands that I knew and the people that I knew in the bands. Everybody had like a pretty strong personality, and like the guys in Naked Ray Gun and people like that were just very funny, very engaging people. So that actually was more of a starting point. People like the Effigies and the Articles of Faith and all these other bands, and I thought they were great bands, but I used to talk about it with Anthony Alarde, who was the drummer of Right to the Accused. Like, we used to talk about it all the time. I'd be like, oh, someone should do it. Someone should do it. Then I was like, let's do it. What the hell? How hard could it be to make a movie, right?
Well, and I guess that's the next question. How hard was it?
Oh.
It was hard. And it took a long time. But it was worth it. It was worth it.
How long from concept to getting it out there?
Almost 7 years.
Yeah, I think we talked about doing it for 3 or 4 years before we even started.
Yeah.
We kept hoping someone else would do it. And then we realized no one was going to do it. So we might as well start.
Yeah.
And maybe someone will finish it, but we ended up just finishing it. So.
Yeah.
I'm glad you did. It came out great.
Thanks.
We had jobs too.
Yeah, it was hard.
I had Hi-Fi Records. I ran a record store, and so yeah.
Listen, I understand what a side hustle is all about. I get it.
Yeah. So it's not like we could dedicate our full lives to the film at all times,
Yeah, we got married during it.
Well, since you were doing it on your own, I mean, you could do it on your own timetable, right? You didn't have
Yeah.
to answer to anybody. So
Exactly.
it's a nice luxury of independent filmmaking.
Yeah.
You mentioned some of the personalities and the characters. Let's start right with Steve Albini, who is just a soundbite machine. He's a trip, and he holds nothing back. If he doesn't like something or someone, he puts it out there. What was working with him on this movie like, or interviewing him?
Great.
I mean, that's great. Like, to me, that I don't have a problem with that at all. Like, I think that's great. I think that's how people should be. You know, to be perfectly honest. I mean, the thing is, I guess that's how people are now, I guess, on the internet. But at least, you know, he's a smart, articulate guy. You know, I don't always agree with him, but you know, he's very funny. He's got a really interesting take on things.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he was a great writer. Like when he wrote for Matter magazine and stuff like that, I was a big fan of his. And you know, he's one of those guys that has a reputation. But when I would talk to him at shows and when I was a little kid and stuff, like he was always nothing but super friendly and super nice and just, you know, like all those dudes. You know, you could go up to Naked Ray Gun at a show and talk to any band member. They would always be like the nicest, coolest guys. You know, so.
Articles of Faith took a little bit of a beating in the movie.
Okay.
And let's, for people,
it was not my intention at all. I mean, everybody who was around back then knew that there was this Articles of Faith versus Effigies thing, and then there was this Articles of Faith versus, I knew about the Articles of Faith versus the Effigies. I didn't really know about Steve Albini hating.
That was one of my biggest takeaways. I can't talk about Albini in this movie without talking about Articles of Faith and how there's a decades-long rivalry that could end in fisticuffs at some point if those two ever like.
Oh, I don't think Vic is like a super smart, super accomplished guy. I think he maybe, you know, I think he maybe got a little riled up, but I think he was playing it up for the camera a little bit, to be honest.
Fair. And for people who are watching either on Facebook or YouTube or listening to the podcast, a lot of these bands haven't stayed in the public consciousness as long as, say, Naked Ray Gun, whose shirt I'm draped in right now. So I'm going to ask you throughout to kind of provide context for some of these bands as someone who knows these artists, or as people who know these artists and who talk to them and know their music intimately. Explain Articles of Faith.
I loved Articles of Faith, and like Articles of Faith to me were like Chicago's thrashy hardcore band that was more in step with what was going on in the rest of the country, you know. And you know, Albini tries to paint that as a fault. That's his opinion. I thought they were fantastic. I mean, if you saw them live back then, they were one of the best live groups you could see. I mean,
they were one of the first Chicago bands I ever heard of. Yeah,
I mean, they kicked major ass live. They were like, I mean, it was like getting hit with like a brick wall. I mean, it was awesome. They were a really, really great live band, and Chicago, and they were like the band that helped out the smaller bands, as we pointed out in the film. They were the band that started the Hall, that did all ages shows. Yeah. So they were really important to the Chicago punk scene as we, that's why, like you said, they took a beating, but I'm like, I don't know. We point out all the amazing things that they did for the city's punk scene. Like without them, I really don't know that the scene would have been as great, especially for younger bands.
Totally fair. And I think I was zeroing in on the Albini part of the story. A band that gets a lot of love in the movie, a lot of respect, a lot of, oh my God, you had to see them to believe them, is Strike Under. And this is classic showbiz. I mean, they burnt out before fading away.
Yeah,
that's a band whose legacy should probably be larger than what it is.
Yeah, they were great. Yeah. I never got to see them. That was a little before my time, but no, they were fantastic. They were really, and I think that they're a band that probably could have gone beyond the small punk world, and probably because they're just really cool guys. They're very talented musicians. They have really great interesting tastes in music still, you know, like Chris Bjorkman is an amazing guitar player. Steve is just an amazing artist, and they're just really, you know, artistically curious people. So it's too bad because I think they would have gone on and made like a couple of really fantastic albums if they would have stayed together. But don't be in a band with your brother, I guess. I don't know.
And I think it's great that we have footage of them in the film also. You know, they didn't, I don't think it was really recorded that many times. So, and that's the other thing, we just have really great footage.
I love the footage you have, like the loft party footage. Like, it's stuff that I feel like shouldn't even exist. Like, I can't believe that.
Yeah, and that was the other thing when making the film. It was really hard to find this footage. A lot of people, their archives were like in the back of a closet, in the garage, up in the attic.
Literally, yeah.
And it was really weird because when we started, there was just nothing. And then as it slowly went on, more and more started appearing. But it was just hidden. It was totally hidden.
One of the things I found interesting about the movie is just how acrimonious the relationship was between punks and the city at large, the police, the punk clubs. I mean, it really was punks versus the man.
Yeah.
In this period. And you encapsulate it. Like, my first knowledge as a kid of Chicago punk rock was the cop coats, was the you know, the ray gun look, the Chicago flag on the sleeve. And it's mentioned in the movie just how pissed off that made the Chicago police. Like, that was just basically like waving a flag in front of the police saying "fuck with me."
Yeah.
It was. Yeah.
I think it was. I mean, I think it was worse. Probably worse in like the 70s, like the Lemire Vipier, O'Banion's scene. And then by the early 80s, I don't know if the cops cared quite as much. Because when I started going to shows, I mean, every now and then a show would get broken up, but the cops just looked bored. They were just like they didn't want to put in any work. Like beating you up would have been too much work. They were just like, yeah, okay, I guess we got to close the show down, you know.
And it was a little less shocking. They'd worn them down a little bit by the 80s.
I think so too. But I think that the earlier years, especially with Lemire being a gay club and having that part of the mix thrown in there, definitely, I think that era was probably a little tougher.
And I want to again provide context, because some of us were not there, and some of these clubs, maybe we heard the names, but a lot of us had never had the chance to go there. Lemire, this club that very early on supported local punk, it met with a controversial demise,
one of several fires to end Chicago punk clubs. It seemed to be a theme.
That's another one of the memorable stories. Was place went up in flames, and had a history of not
it's
really.
It's funny
making
because there's some people that would talk off camera about it, but not on camera. And we got some conflicting theories as to what happened. So I don't know, like, I don't want to say them because I'm not, you know, they're just theories, but they're definitely conflicting. Like, so, and, you know, some people said it was the owners themselves, but other people pointed out like they didn't have insurance. So there was nothing for them to gain by lighting their own club on fire. But it, you know, in all likelihood, it could have been someone more in a position of authority.
Authority. I think it's an interesting perspective. You know, watching the movie, we do take for granted the accessibility of live music and the bands we like. We can see bands everywhere, anywhere, when we're not in a horrific dystopian situation because of a pandemic. But outside of that, we can see punk at any number of places. But it was definitely a subcultural thing back then, and these clubs would pop up, and it wasn't a given that you could go out with your friends and see punk rock anywhere. You had to know where to go. And as these stories are being told, O'Banion's was River North, right?
I think so. Wasn't it on Clark Street?
I think it was. I've never been.
I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, I never went there either. I'm not that old. I'm not.
as people are describing, I'm thinking, oh my God, like that area now is super touristy. And I'm
Oh, yeah.
assuming it was kind of touristy back then, but it was described as seedy and
Yeah.
a strip of gay bars. And that doesn't sound like that area now. It's such an interesting frame of reference, because for those of us of a certain age, like we have no connection with this period in Chicago. It's just fascinating.
Yeah.
This place would pop up in the middle of that area where, up until recently, the Rainforest Cafe was.
Yeah. Plus, it was still, I mean, very, from what I understand, the O'Banions area was, I mean, I think O'Banions might have been a gay club that was mob connected in some way, and a lot of
That checks all the boxes right there.
Yeah, I know, but a lot of the gay clubs in that area had some kind of mob connection. I mean, they're about making money. If they can make money, they're gonna do it.
Yeah.
But I think that, I mean, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like now everything is so antiseptic and glossed over and clean. And that's why I like when I'll see like some kind of punk rockery person today, and like their jackets, like everything just looks so clean. It's just like this like perfectly, printed patch. Like everybody just looks so hairs like, it's like, I don't remember people being that put together back then. Everything was more like a freaking mess and an experiment gone wrong, kind of sloppily.
Garbage bag.
Yeah, like just kind of thrown together, which to me is a little more, was a little more real, a little more fun.
Staying on the club track for a little bit, Oz. One of my takeaways is that was, if I could go back in time and go to any of these places, I'd probably want to go to Oz. It seemed like that was the center of everything.
Yeah.
I think that Oz definitely had its crowd. It had their own crowd, because we had a lot of people that didn't like Oz, like a lot of people from from the Lemaire scene and the O'Banion scene. Like I think the people that hung out at Oz were part of a specific crew, because some people thought it just was like a shithole, basically.
Just the recording the album with, Tim Powell like running wires into the street, just that kind of like furtive under the cover of night recording an album, and just I love. There's so many great stories in this, and those stick out. Jumping around a little bit, I truly knew nothing about the beginning of this scene. So when it opens at the beginning and you're talking about, I knew Skafish, but Tutu and the Pirates, completely new to my knowledge. Like had no, what an interesting time.
Yeah.
And the idea that punk bands were playing Mothers on Division Street is another topic altogether. But those early days, there were some legit characters. One of my favorite discussions is about Mentally Ill, who did the song Gacy's Place, which I think was universally regarded in the movie as just demented, and like almost a bridge too far.
Yeah. Plus that they were like high school kids too, which is great. Those four high school kids that they did it at the studio. Do you remember those ads? Did you grow up in Chicago?
I did.
Do you remember those Starbeat ads?
Starbeat presents What's Happening.
Starbeat presents What's Happening. They recorded that record at that guy's studio.
That's amazing.
The guy who did those ads, and he sold them to whatever radio station. They did it at his home studio, and he was just like, I don't know what the hell this is when he was recording them.
That's amazing. I want to say his name was Steve too.
Yeah, I'm not sure, and there was also, I think, during like the blizzard.
Yeah.
And because they couldn't drive, they had to carry the drums through the snow.
That's amazing.
Because he lived a couple of like down the block or something from them, so they had to actually carry all their gear through the snow, which is very like the old west of hardcore punk recording or something.
A couple of the bands that got a lot of love, the Effigies for sure.
Oh yeah.
Those songs. I mean, who doesn't love Body Bag? That's if there were hit records from that scene in that era, Body Bag is probably a top 5.
Yeah. Those first 3 records are fantastic.
And very Chicago.
Yeah.
And let's talk about Ray Gun. When Ray Gun started, they were kind of goofy. Like
Yeah.
Jeff Pizzotti came out of a metal band, and
Yeah.
he had a different type of look, and
Yeah.
they were kind of perceived as arty, and it seemed like maybe they didn't lock it fully in until Haggerty joined the band. Is that
Some people, I love Basement Screams. I mean, to me, Basement Screams is the one that really, where it all starts to congeal. And that was before Haggerty was in the band. That's when Santiago.
right?
I mean, yeah, Santiago was still in the band. Some people claim when Santiago and Haggerty, there was a brief period where they both played guitar. And some people say that was the best lineup. But I only think they did maybe one or two shows.
I forgot who said it, and maybe it was Santiago, talking about Haggerty playing sax on Basement Screams. What we learned about that was it Santiago? What we learned about that was John Haggerty's a really good guitar player.
Yeah, that was Camilo, I think. So.
Camilo, yeah.
That was fantastic. Because this is Chicago, Midwesterners, we're really good at self-deprecating humor. We like to laugh at ourselves. It seems to me that Rights of the Accused was the right band at the right time.
Oh yeah, yeah.
They just took the piss out of it. Even seeing Mike McConnell in this movie, every time he was on screen, he made me laugh.
Yeah. Well, he had outfit changes. He came with outfit changes.
He did.
That's great.
That's true.
This doesn't surprise me in the least. Did you, having lived through much of this, did you learn stuff that you didn't know before about the scene?
Oh yeah, yeah. I like you. I didn't really know about Lemire Viper. I didn't really know that much about the early scene. I mean, Tutu and the Pirates, to me, I would see their name every now and then, like in the Illinois Entertainer or something like that. But I didn't even think they were punk. I thought they were just, because of their name, I thought they were like Stevie Starlight or something like that. I thought they were like, we're joke rock or something like that. Like, I had no idea they were a punk band at all, just because of the name, I thought it was like a gag.
Another great Albini line from the movie. You mentioned the Illinois Entertainer. He talked about the kiss of death. Anyone who appears on the cover of Illinois Entertainer, like their career goes in, I think he said, an immediate tailspin.
Yes.
After that happens.
I know, but you know what? It's a little unfair because when the people at the Entertainer were super cool to us. They let us dig through their archives. And I was going through issues of the Entertainer from 1977, and they were doing record reviews of like the Saints and the Ramones and like Lydia Lunch. I saw like an article about Lydia Lunch. I mean, that's pretty adventurous for the Illinois Entertainer in like the 70s.
Absolutely.
So
they need a documentary.
So what else did you learn?
I also didn't really know like, I don't know if we knew about the whole mafia gay club connection.
Yeah, it was interesting to learn most of the gay clubs were mob owned, which I think we just never realized. I don't know why.
Yeah.
And it was interesting that most of the punk clubs had been gay bars and they had just switched over.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, as we learned in the movie, wasn't always met with great response from.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
From
but
the
they
gay
were one of
community,
the
especially.
only clubs that would be open to this new, this new music. There was a lot of gay people in the early punk scene. So.
Were there any people who turned you down? Were there any like great white whales you couldn't land?
There was a couple people we tried to get. A couple people passed away, sadly, like that we tried to get, and they one or two people have passed away. I mean, we didn't have a budget, so we couldn't really fly that much. We flew a couple of times. Some people living outside of the Chicago that we just didn't have the money to be flying out. I mean, there's a couple earlier people. I mean, no one. I guess we could have had Skafish a little bit more, but I feel like Skafish is such a really interesting story. He almost deserves his own documentary in a weird way, because his story is really, really interesting and kind of important to the Chicago scene. So other than that.
And then I think the thing for me was no one really knew the difference between like what was punk and what was new wave, and then what was the next thing. Everything was sort of murky in the early days of the scene, which was interesting to kind of hear and have people talk about also.
Yeah, it wasn't such a straitjacket.
Because they will go, this band
music.
was punk, and then you would listen to it like, that's kind of new wave, or what became known as new wave, you
Yeah.
know, but it was.
Well, that
punk
was on the front
then.
end. On the front end of that is new wave versus punk, and then the schism between punk and hardcore.
Yeah.
Lines were drawn in the sand there
Right.
on the other side of
Mhm.
this era or
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
time frame.
And then you had a band like Da that kind of just, it completely existed in their own universe, you know, like they were part of the punk scene and almost part of the hardcore scene and kind of new wavy, but yet completely not.
That was a band I hadn't heard of before watching this movie.
Yeah, and they're great.
They're probably the
Awesome.
band that we get asked about the most of any of the bands in the film. For that, people are always, I mean, I would say, a lot of people know Naked Ray Gun and the Effigies and Articles of Faith, but Da is the band that we get inquired about the most from just like outside people.
Yeah, I mean, just based on watching the movie, I'm like, oh, this sounds like cool post-punk or
Yeah.
something Susie and the Banshees-esque. Didn't feel punk in the movie,
Mhm.
but it certainly fit that whole scene and that vibe. And it's Chicago.
And they
It just
were a
worked.
DAW band too. They were one of the Oz, I'm sorry, one of the
Well,
Oz bands.
Sam said they weren't an Oz band.
They considered themselves.
I don't know.
I don't know. All right, that's the controversy there.
So the movie's been out. It is streamable. And would you ever follow that up with the next 10 years in movie form?
No. Somebody already made a film. What was it called? Shit.
Oh, yeah.
There's been someone that made a film kind of about like late 80s to early 90s. I can't remember the name of it. I haven't seen it actually. I mean, nah. We are working on a Chicago metal documentary though.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes, from the 80s.
Oh, that's awesome. See,
Yeah.
okay. That takes away one of my questions. What's next? There you go.
So we're still in the early stages. We don't have a name yet. We've done quite a bit of interviews. We kind of, everything got thrown off schedule because of COVID,
Yeah.
obviously. But it's it's not just about like, it's more about like underground Chicago metal, like the bands that were kind of contemporaries of Metallica and Megadeth and Slayer and Anthrax, you know, like Trouble, E-Trope, Snow White, Master, Mayhem, bands like that, which, except for Trouble, not a lot of people know.
I was going to say after Trouble, my knowledge starts to.
Yeah, that pretty much everyone else, because people are like, why are you doing this? I'm like, well, people said the same thing when we did You Weren't There. Like, a lot of people didn't know those bands either, to be honest. So, I've played with several of those bands, and my band Life Sentence, like we were kind of a little more friendly and hung out with those guys than I'd say even more than the punk and hardcore scene. And I just always loved those bands. And I always thought like those dudes were all like really funny, really crazy, and really like awesome dudes. And we just want, I feel like there's something there. Like, I feel like there's a story there, because the interviews we've done so far have been pretty fucking awesome.
Very good.
Yeah. So
I believe it.
You
mentioned Life Sentence. It seems like if you blink, you might miss Life Sentence in this movie. Were you cognizant of not wanting to overstay the presence of your band in the movie you were making? Were you trying to like not have a conflict of interest, I guess?
Yeah. It was just kind of like we'd seen a documentary. It was about Rodney Bingenheimer.
From
Rodney
the DJ.
It's made by the guy in that band Dramarama.
Yeah.
So then there's like a 15-minute section in this movie about Dramarama and how great Dramarama. And I'm like, all right, I can't have that happen.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
I felt we should be in there. I mean, Life Sentence, I think, technically started in 84. So we're kind of on the tail end of that anyway. So,
And we just wanted to touch on that shift to hardcore anyways in the film, and not really linger on it too much.
And I mean, and to be honest, like Life Sentence, we became bigger in the rest of the country than we did in Chicago. Like Chicago really didn't do a lot for us. They didn't really give a shit about us until like after we were broken up, pretty much. So like that's why we, it's a long, complicated story as to why that's its own movie.
One of my favorite pieces of footage that you used in the movie is the Phil Donahue show.
Oh yeah.
Which, it's like everyone on both sides is out of central casting. Just what will eventually be known as Karens, talking about the scourge of punk rock and how it's just aberrant and destroying the cultural fabric of our society. And then the punks who have this kind of nihilistic, dismissive attitude toward them. It's like a theater of the absurd watching that segment.
But with heavy Chicago accents.
Yes, with heavy Chicago accents. That right there, that's worth the price of admission for this movie alone, just seeing that play out, those two sides.
Yeah. Yeah, that was great.
One thing, watching the footage of Big Black, that's the Chicago I kind of remember when I started going to shows. Like, I miss that. I miss going to shows, walking in a club, and then suddenly there's a band like that on a small stage. There hasn't been enough of that in my life over the past 10 years. And for whatever reason, the Big Black footage just struck a chord with me. Like that feels like the Chicago scene right there.
Yeah.
Well, you could
above and beyond punk rock.
There's like 10 people in the audience.
Yeah, that's the thing. And but it's awesome. It's you and 9 other people enjoying this moment. And that's how it should be.
I think we touched upon it a little bit in the film. Like Big Black were really not that popular in Chicago for a while. Again, I think they became big in the rest of the country, and then they were okay because of Steve's, a lot of his reputation and the articles that he would write, and being a shit stirrer or whatever.
When I first learned what Jordan, Minnesota was about, I'm like, really? Oh, fuck. Okay, that's about as dark as music gets. Wow. So again, that movie, which you can stream anywhere, it's been out forever. Not forever, but it's been out for a while. But it's the kind of movie we could still talk about like it's new, because this is a historical piece. It looks back on this period of time. You weren't there. A history of Chicago punk, 1977 to 1984. It's a period that's been largely overlooked, and there's so many great bands worth digging into. I love FGs and Raygun. Articles of Faith are cool. What a cool time capsule. Thank you for taking 7 years to put that together for us.
You're welcome.
Had we known it would take 7 years.
Since you are punk rock movie auteurs, let's talk about the other movie, because all you do is make punk rock movies at this point.
That's true. It's true.
Painted myself into a corner a little bit there.
That's just kind of your thing. Sacrificial Youth.
Is
the punk musical, which is also available for streaming and watching.
Yeah.
It's a fun movie. There's a scene in the beginning, kind of a bullying scene, where the bullies are bullying the punk kids, saying, "Didn't punk die in 1996?" Like, but to that end, I mean, the scene and what is punk rock has gone through so many different permutations over the past few decades, and you've seen and ridden all those waves. Tell me, give the elevator pitch of Sacrificial Youth.
So because it took us 7 years to make the documentary, I'm like, we should make a narrative film. I'm sure it'd be a lot easier. Which was, I mean, if I think too deeply about anything, I won't do anything. If I was smarter, I wouldn't do anything. It's as simple as that. But so I wanted to make a musical and a hardcore punk. I always thought you could make a musical with hardcore, as the style. But then I kind of quickly realized that like it can't just be all like thrashy and hardcore. People are not going to be able to handle it, So there's some rockish songs in there.
What's your elevator pitch?
There's no elevator pitch. There's a waiting at the DMV pitch.
But I like it. It's kind of raw. It feels kind of authentic.
We didn't know what we were doing at all in any way. Like not even.
I guess someone needs to save the scene, right?
Yes. The TJ. TJ is modeled, the main character is modeled on the archetype of the Ian McKay and the Jello Biafra and Henry Rollins, this like, Jesus Messiah punk rock singer guy. And he's going to tell you the right way to do things. So it was kind of a bust on that, like joking on that thing a little bit.
I thought it was super
but
fun.
what if he actually was the second coming?
Yeah, it goes to some places that are perhaps unexpected. It's a lot of fun to watch.
I mean, it's got some flaws, but it was fun, and I stand by the music.
Hell yes. Hell yes. All right. So up next, you're talking to metal bands from the 80s, which anyone can do a documentary about the big bands that came out of the city, especially in the 90s and 21st century. I like that you're kind of turning over these rocks and exposing things that a lot of us aren't familiar with, or we don't know in great detail what these stories are. That's cool to me. I like the discovery aspect of
we
stories
too.
you're telling. I think it's super cool.
I mean, if the people aren't interesting, you don't have a good movie. I mean, we've watched a gazillion music documentaries, and sometimes they're just like watching paint dry. They're just
totally
so
agree.
Freaking dull. Sometimes with people you love, like artists you love or whatever, and you're just like, I don't know what happened here, or they're just very workmanlike and like a tutorial.
They're too stripped down.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good to we try to just be conversational with people and just be very loose, and it's like they're like with You Weren't There too. It was just like I knew that there was awesome people, like really.
That's it. We're a city of characters.
Yeah, it's true, and it's like even if it's a documentary, you still need interesting characters, who can tell good stories,
And it's filled with them. Well, thank you for joining me on a Friday night.
Thank you.
I'm excited to see what you come up with next. I can't recommend this enough. If you have any interest in music, in punk rock, in Chicago history, there's so much of this in the documentary You Weren't There. Just I strongly recommend it to anyone watching or listening. For both of you, Christina, Joe, thank you for doing this little podcast interview.
Awesome.
No,
Cool.
awesome. Thank you.
We'll come back when the other film's done and you're back in your car going to rest.
Oh yeah, I'll feed you next time for sure.
Yes.